thank you all for being here on a sunny Chicago summer night to hear about one of the most important issues of the universe. I am mostly going to be focusing on something that is very much a work in progress. I've been working for the city and working for the commission for just about 2 months. The commission at this point consists only of me. I'll eventually have a much larger staff, and there will be a commission in place. We'll talk about that process in a little bit, and the commission will do real work. Now it's just laying the foundation for this thing that will be created soon. So I'm going to begin with a presentation that gives some background on the ordinance that created the commission, and that walks through the two bodies that Kelly talked about in the introduction, the community commission and the district councils. And I hope that I will take up less than half of my time talking about those things, so that we'll have plenty of opportunity for conversation. When talking about this issue, it's always hard to know where to start the story. We could start in 1919 with the race riots that began with the racially motivated killing of a Black child, and which led to the creation of a commission on race relations that, among other things, found widespread racism in the police department, but led to no meaningful change. Or we could start with the Summerdale Scandal in 1960, which revealed that uniformed Chicago police officers were plotting and carrying out burglaries and taking bribes. That scandal led to the creation of the Chicago Police Board, which still exists in a slightly modified form, and briefly put the police department under the direction of the police board. Or we could start in 1966, when Martin Luther King and the Chicago Freedom Movement nailed a list of demands on the door of City Hall, and the demands included creation of a citizens review board for grievances against the police. Or we could start in 1969, when police raided an apartment on the West Side and killed 21-year-old Black Panther leader Fred Hampton and a Black Panther member, Mark Clark. Or we could start in 1973 with the Metcalf Commission report that a year later, in 1974, led to the creation of a new body, the Office of Professional Standards, which investigated allegations of police misconduct. It was staffed by civilians, but it was still a part of the police department. But having civilians take on that role was a whole new thing. Or we could start with a period from the early 1970s until the early 1990s, when John Burge, first as a police detective, then as a police commander, was involved in torturing at least 118 people, almost all of them Black, in an effort to force confessions. Or we could start in 2007, when, after OPS had faced a ton of criticism that it wasn't doing enough to hold police officers accountable for misconduct, and after a bunch more scandals involving police officers who used excessive force, the city decided to disband OPS and create a new body called the Independent Police Review Authority, or IPRA. Like OPS, IPRA was about investigating the more serious allegations of police misconduct, but this time it existed outside the police department, and it was entirely under civilian control. And over time, IPRA faced a lot of criticism too, for finding nearly every police department shooting to be justified. Kelly, can we have the next slide, please?
Mm-hmm.
Thanks. But I'm going to start in November of 2015 with the release of the video of a Chicago police officer, Jason Van Dyke, killing a teenager, Laquan McDonald. Laquan was killed in October of 2014. And as I'm sure many of you remember, at the time, police reports said that he was behaving erratically and that he lunged at police officers with a knife. A few months after the killing, a reporter got a copy of the autopsy report, and the report showed that Laquan had been shot 16 times, mostly in the back. And when the city was finally forced to release the dash cam video of the killing, it showed that the story that police officers had told about the killing, that Laquan was lunging at police officers, wasn't true, that in fact, he hadn't been lunging, he'd been moving away. And in the wake of the public protest following the release of that video, then Mayor Rahm Emanuel created the Police Accountability Task Force, chaired by now Mayor Lori Lightfoot. In April of 2016, the task force issued a report. It had over 100 recommendations, including some really big proposed structural reforms. Going back to the litany that I began with, one of the recommendations was to disband IPRA and replace it with a new oversight body, the Civilian Office of Police Accountability, or COPA. So there's another iteration of that. And another recommendation for big structural reform was to create a community oversight board. There wasn't much community participation at all in the work of the task force. There hadn't been meaningful input into the task force's work. So the task force didn't offer a lot of specifics about what this community oversight board should be, about how it should be created, about what its powers should be. Most of all, it said that a board should be created, and it should be created with broad public input. So based on that recommendation, a bunch of community organizations working in neighborhoods across the city came together a couple months after the report came out in the spring of 2016, and ultimately agreed to form a coalition called the Grassroots Alliance for Police Accountability. Full disclosure, I did a bunch of work with the Grassroots Alliance for Police Accountability, or GAPA, over the next bunch of years up until the time I took my current job. Kelly, may I have the next slide, please? So over the next year, after they came together in the spring of 2016, GAPA pulled together about 2,000 people in neighborhoods across the city in the process of developing a proposal for a community oversight board. They did a really deep dive on police oversight in Chicago and around the country. They talked to lots of regional experts and national experts and developed an ordinance. Every single piece of the ordinance, which was many, many pages long, was the result of lots of discussion, lots of input, and a democratic decision-making process. So what was ultimately created really reflected the thinking and the priorities of the very large number of people who participated in developing the ordinance. Next slide, please. In March of 2018, after a little bit less than a year of work, GAPA issued a report on its recommendations and introduced an ordinance into City Council that incorporated the recommendations. After the ordinance was introduced, GAPA spent about 3 years working to refine it with the mayor's office, aldermen, the police department, and lots of other stakeholders. There were meetings at least every 2 weeks, sometimes every week, sometimes a bunch of meetings a week throughout the process, still a ton of community engagement throughout. And again, every important decision to change anything that was in the ordinance was made by community members. Nothing was changed without their support. At the same time, as GAPA was doing its work, there was another grassroots effort underway pushing for something similar. It was driven by a group called the Chicago Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression, or CARPR. That's another broad community-based coalition that in 2016, actually before the task force issued its report, had introduced a different ordinance called CPAC that had similar goals, but a different approach, and a lot of grassroots support. By late 2020, it was pretty clear that neither GAPA nor CPAC had enough support in City Council to pass their individual ordinances alone. So the two different coalitions decided that the best and only path forward was to join forces. So they worked together for months to create an ordinance that included elements of the two different ordinances that they'd been working for. And that was introduced a bit over a year ago. And then last summer, in July of 2022, the City Council passed the joint ordinance, which by then was called the Empowering Communities for Public Safety Ordinance. More than 2/3 of the City Council voted in support of it. And it was a great and joyous day. And when the ordinance passed, lots of the reporting about the ordinance described it as historic. We will leave it to history to determine whether that is right. With the next slide, start talking about what's in the ordinance. So as Kelly said at the outset, the ordinance sets up two new bodies. There's the Community Commission that is going to work citywide, and district councils that will work in each of the city's 22 police districts. I'll first give you just a quick overview of the two bodies and a little bit about how they interrelate, and then we'll talk in more detail about each one. So the Community Commission is basically the community oversight board that the Police Accountability Task Force called for. It has a bunch of powers, which again, we'll talk about in detail, powers to make systemic reform. It'll have 7 members. They'll have to make, they'll have to meet qualifications that are laid out in the ordinance, including pretty extensive requirements about work they've done, and also requirements that there be geographic diversity. So there will need to be at least 2 people from the west side, 2 people from the south side, 2 people from the north side, 1 other person from anywhere on the commission. Starting next year, commissioners will be nominated by the district councils that I'll talk about in a moment, then selected by the mayor and approved by the city councils. The district councils, as Kelly said, will be created in each police district. Each of the 22 district councils will be made up of 3 people elected in each police district, so 66 people citywide, although they'll really be focused on the work in their district, focusing on making improvements within the district and on plans to make the neighborhood safer. They'll work to engage a lot of people in the district, but there will also be a formal structured connection between the district councils and the community commission, which will help to make sure that the commission's work is rooted in knowledge about what's happening on the ground and what people in neighborhoods across the city are concerned about. One thing I want to emphasize just about this structure and the relationship between the district councils and the commission is that the process for selecting the commissioners starts with the district councils, then it gives the mayor a choice, and then it requires the city council to confirm the mayor's choice, to decide whether to confirm the mayor's choice. So everyone on the commission at the end of the day, all 7 people, will have community support through the district councils and the mayor's support and city council support. So the idea is to have buy-in from all over. Because the commission is rooted in the district councils, the first district council elections aren't going to be until the regular municipal elections next February. There's going to be an interim commission set up, and I'll talk a bit later about that process. And the interim commission will probably be selected within the next 2 or 3 months. The ordinance lays out specific goals for the commission. At the end of the day, it's all about public safety. Every piece of the ordinance is intended to advance that goal. It's also about building trust between the police department and the people it serves. And that's because trust and public safety are totally intertwined. No surprise, I'm sure, to anyone on this call that in too many communities, too many people don't trust the police. And without trust, the system just doesn't work. Police can't do their jobs. They can't get good information. You really need a policing system rooted in trust, so we need to build that trust where it doesn't exist and strengthen it everywhere. The more we build trust, the safer and healthier we'll all be. The system is also fundamentally about accountability, but it's a new approach to accountability. We talked a little bit earlier about COPA and the police board. COPA investigates police-involved shootings and allegations that a police officer did something wrong. The police board decides whether and how a police officer should be punished if there was a finding that they did something wrong. Some people talk about that as back-end accountability. It's about what we do on the back end after a police officer has done something wrong. And those systems, of course, are super important, and we need them to work well and to work better than they do now. But we also need a lot more front-end accountability. We need to do more to address problems before things go wrong. So this new commission fundamentally isn't about punishing people after something bad has happened. We have systems in place that are designed to do that. But it's really about changing the systems that consistently produce those bad outcomes. And we'll talk specifically about how the commission can do that. Kelly, can we have the next slide? So what are the powers that the commission has to accomplish its goals? The big picture notion is that the commission, with tons of engagement from people across the city, will play a big role in picking key leaders like the police superintendent, the head of COPA, and members of the police board, in setting police department policies and priorities, and then holding the leaders of those entities accountable for the policies and priorities. And by doing that, and by doing it with a lot of community input and in collaboration with the police department, the commission will help to build more trust between the police department and the people they serve, build more legitimacy for the police department and its policies, and make civilians and police officers safer. To do all that, the commission has 6 key powers that you see on the slide. The first is helping to select or selecting key public safety leaders. So when there's an opening for police superintendent, the commission is going to lead the search. It'll give the names of 3 finalists to the mayor. The mayor can either pick from that list or ask for a new list. Once the mayor makes a pick, city council votes on whether to confirm that choice. So, so every police superintendent, as a result of this process, will have the support of the community commission, have the support of the mayor and the city council. The commission will have unilateral authority to pick the head of COPA. City council will need to vote on whether to confirm. The commission will also nominate people to serve on the police board. It'll be the same kind of process as for the superintendent. So the commission will nominate people and the mayor will choose from a list from the commission. The commission will also be able to play a role in removing the people that it's involved in selecting. So for the police superintendent and the police board, the commission won't at the end of the day have the power to fire. Only the mayor is going to be able to make that ultimate decision to remove somebody. But the commission can start the process. So the commission will have the power to, following a bunch of due process and public hearings, take a public vote of no confidence. If that happens, then there's a city council process, and ultimately it'll go to the mayor to make a decision. And the idea is, even if the ultimate decision is in the mayor's hands, the mayor's going to have to take very seriously some recommendation coming from a community commission, assuming the community commission is regarded as legitimate and its views are valued as representative of something. So if there are serious problems with a leader, there's now a way for the community to hold them accountable, and we're not wholly dependent on just the mayor for making those decisions. Second, the commission will have the authority to set policy for the police department, COPA, and the police board. And this is really a giant-sized change. Right now, the police department makes policy on its own, and it doesn't need to get public input. It usually doesn't get any. And when it gets input, the police department can ignore it. There's nothing that's unique about that. The way that the Chicago Police Department makes policy now isn't any different than almost every other police department anywhere on the planet. But in democracies, police departments are really outliers in this respect. In almost every area of government, policies are made by civilians with lots of public input. And we do that because we think that that process produces better policies, and that those policies ultimately have more public support when they go through that process. And it's really just police departments that don't operate that way. So the idea is that when civilians play a key role in police department policymaking, we'll get better policies. We think it's more likely that those policies will reflect best practices and they'll reflect our values. That doesn't mean that there isn't a role for CPD in the policymaking process. CPD will probably continue to play a very substantial role. Expectation is that the department will still draft most policy, maybe all of it. The commission will have the authority to draft policy too, but whenever policy is drafted, whether it's by CPD or by the commission, the ordinance requires that the commission and CPD come together to talk about it, find areas of concern, work to resolve any differences, and try to build consensus. At the end of the day, though, the commission can take a vote and has the authority to pass policy on its own, and nothing will become police department policy without the vote of the commission. Once the commission takes a vote, the mayor will have the power to veto a policy that's passed by the commission, and the city council can override that veto by a 2/3 majority. So it's just like any other veto power that exists anywhere in our democratic process, city, state, county, national. And the expectation is that that veto power will be used very sparingly. Third power that the commission has is to set annual goals for the police department and COPA and the police board. And there'll be a big public process for doing that. And then every year, at the end of the year, they'll assess the progress that the police department has made in reaching those goals. And I think that that has the potential to be a really significant power, one that hasn't gotten a lot of attention. Just when we think through the years about the many times that the police department has faced criticism for failing to address some big issue, for say failing to make a policy in a particular area, or to advance some kind of a program that is broadly regarded as being really important for public safety. There hasn't been any great way to put pressure on the police department to make to do what there is broad support to do. So the commission, through this goal setting process, can help advance that. Fourth power, the commission will review the police department budget and make recommendations about it before the city council votes on the budget. The mayor's still going to have the power to draft the budget. City council is still going to have the power to vote on the budget, but there will now be this important additional check in the process, and a way to get more meaningful input into the substance of the police department budget. Fifth power, outside of its policymaking power, the commission can make recommendations about any other way to improve public safety and public health, which could include things that don't rely as much on the police. And I think this too has the potential to be incredibly significant. There's a growing consensus, we can talk about this more later if you'd like, including among police officers, that there's a lot of work that police departments do that could be done as well or better by other people with different expertise. or in collaboration with other people with different expertise. And we're starting to make some progress in the city exploring those kinds of alternatives. The commission can play a big and important role in moving those kinds of conversations forward. Finally, the commission has a bunch of different tools to engage with people, learn about their issues and concerns, and work to address them. So the commission is going to have public meetings at least once a month. The commission can, for example, require that the police superintendent come in and talk about issues, answer questions, and the commission can do that repeatedly until it gets the information that it wants and needs. Commission can conduct research, it can publish reports, it can hold hearings on important issues. There are lots of different tools that it can use to bring attention to an issue and work to advance an agenda. The next slide. I'm going to spend a bunch more time talking about the district, less time, sorry, talking about the district councils, but they're incredibly important. And while a lot of the focus in the run-up to passage of the ordinance was about the commission, it's entirely possible that at the end of the day, that the district councils will be every bit as significant and maybe even more significant in driving change. So each police district is going to elect 3 district council members. The members will serve 4-year terms. There are some qualifications to serve on the district council that are laid out in the ordinance. There are going to be regular municipal elections run by the Board of Elections. And the first election, as I mentioned before, is going to be next February, when there will be an election, for example, for mayor. And then there will be elections every 4 years after that. Next slide. So what are these district councils going to do? Their primary function is to build stronger connections between the police and the community in each police district. They're really going to work to make community a real partner in making the neighborhood safer. They'll work with district residents and local police officers to solve problems together, to set priorities together, to build public safety together. Like the commission, they'll have open meetings at least once a month. Those meetings will be a place where folks in a community can come together, raise concerns about policing in the district, and work to address those concerns. There'll be a place where people can bring new strategies like restorative justice into the district. It's not just about the role of the police department. And the district councils are also going to provide a connection to the commission. When we're developing the ordinance and talking to other cities where there are similar citywide bodies, one common complaint was that the citywide bodies get to be too removed from what's happening in communities. So one purpose of the district council is to keep the commission informed about what's happening on the ground and to help ensure that the commission's work is really rooted in residents' concerns and priorities. And there's actually going to be a formal process that's written into the ordinance about how to make sure that that happens on a regular basis. And then, as we talked about before, the district councils are going to play a role in selecting members of the community commission. So again, that the community commission is really rooted in community. Can I have the next slide? Next and last slide. Exhale. So what's happening now? The first district council elections are going to be in 2023, and a permanent commission is going to be selected after that. But in the meantime, because there is a big desire to get this work going, there's a process underway right now to pick an interim commission. The city council had an open application process. The applicants were interviewed. City council is now doing a second round of interviews. from the people that they're interviewing, they'll nominate 14 people to serve on the interim commission. Those names will go to the mayor. City Council said their goal is to have names to the mayor by the April City Council meeting at the end of April. Then the mayor will choose 7 of those 14 people. Next year, after the district council elections in February, there will be a similar process, but this time driven by the district councils. To select a permanent commission, there will again be an open application process, just like there was for the interim commission. There's a really detailed process that's laid out in the ordinance, just like the city council is now nominating 14 people, the district councils will nominate 14 people. Those names will go to the mayor. The mayor will choose 7 of them. City council will vote on whether to confirm those 7. And that should all wrap up by fall of 2023. So the interim commission will be in place for probably a little over a year, and permanent commission will be in place in 2023. So where do I fit into all this? The ordinance says that the commission and district councils will have a staff, and it provides a pretty good budget to support that work. I'm the executive director, and my job right now is basically just to build the infrastructure that the commission and district councils will need to succeed. So that means hiring a decent sized staff, developing a training curriculum, and training materials for commissioners and district council members once they're selected, drafting policies and procedures and bylaws for the commission and district councils, which they can review and change or adopt. Thinking about how to structure the work that the district councils will do in each police district, thinking about how they'll work with police officers and leaders in the district, planning an outreach strategy. I know right now, I guess 22 people on this call may know more about the commission and district councils than anybody else in the city of Chicago who I'm not related to. So we need to do a lot to spread the word, to encourage people to step up to participate on the commission and the district councils, and for people who don't want to serve on the commission or district councils, still to get engaged in their community, in the work of the district councils, to get involved citywide in the work of the commission, and lots more. So that's where we are now. I hope to have a team in place and a commission to work with in about 2 months, and would love to hear your questions and your thoughts.
Adam, the first question that we have is, are council members and commissions paid positions?
Kinda. They're not full-time jobs. The expectation is that people should be able to have lives outside of the district council and the commission. The hope is that there will be people who whose day jobs are related to the kind of work that the district councils and commission will do, and the desire was to give them an opportunity to do that. So district council members will get stipends of $500 a month for their work, $6,000 a year, and members of the commission will get paid the same amount as police board members do today, which is $12,000 for members of the police board, $15,000 for the president. So the commission will have a president who will get $15,000 for that work, and the other 6 members will get $12,000 a year.
The balance of any questions will be moderated by my colleague Tina. So please put any questions in the chat. Since we have Adam here with all of his expertise, it would be a shame not to cross-examine him fiercely.
I have a question. You stated there's the foundation of what you're trying to provide to society and to the constituents. How do you say you suggest, like when police already have a rap sheet is what they call it, a rap sheet. And before it gets too far out of hand, what plans do you have to put in place? Like with things like what you said about John Burge, he had a rap sheet before everything had taken place, before he had gotten called in, before he had went to jail. So when you have police officers that already have things in their record, what is the foundation of you doing your research on those police officers so they won't become a plague in society?
That's a great question. And I should say at the outset that I can tell you my thoughts about things, but at the end of the day, it's going to be for members of the commission to decide what they want to do. And because there isn't a commission yet, I can't say what they're going to do. But the issue that you're talking about, I think is a great example in a lot of ways of the kind of thing that the commission absolutely could focus on. So the issue that you're describing, there are officers who have a bunch of red flags in their records, who still manage to stay on the force for a long time. And it's sometimes only after the fact, after something really terrible happens, that we look back and go like, oh, there was a person with 50 complaints or 70 complaints or 100 complaints over the course of their career. Why did nothing happen? For a very long time, people have been urging the creation of some sort of early warning system, something that would flag those kinds of cases before things got really bad. And for a very long time, the police department hasn't put something significant in place to do that. Some other jurisdictions have done that. I think Chicago should be much further along than it is. And I can imagine that might be the sort of thing that the commission would prioritize.
Next question. How will the commission relate to the decree? Will it report to the monitor or to the judge down?
Yeah, so the commission is separate from the consent decree. Imagine many of you know the police department is under a federal court consent decree right now that came as a result of a lawsuit brought by the Illinois Attorney General's office. At the same time as the Police Accountability Task Force was doing its work, the Department of Justice was doing an analysis of the police department. The DOJ report came to many of the same conclusions as the Police Accountability Task Force, and and made a lot of recommendations about big structural reforms. The expectation at that time was that you would have a consent decree between the Department of Justice and the city, as it happened in a bunch of other jurisdictions, and those consent decrees have done a lot to drive reform. But within a couple of weeks of the Department of Justice issuing its report, Donald Trump was inaugurated and got the Department of Justice out of the business of doing that. That led to the Attorney General's lawsuit against the police department, and a similar kind of decree, but now enforced by still enforced by the court, but with the Attorney General as a plaintiff instead of the Department of Justice. The consent decree is its own thing, and it requires the police department to do a ton of stuff. The commission that's being created is totally separate from the consent decree, in that there's no formal relationship between the judge and the commission. There aren't any requirements under the consent decree that apply to the commission. The consent decree winds up putting some limitations on the commission because the consent decree, which was entered into before the commission was created, and which imposes a lot of requirements on the department, has its own requirements for policymaking, and identifies a whole bunch of policies that the police department needs to change, and that need the approval of ultimately of the judge in the under the consent decree. As long as the consent decree is in place, the commission can't set policy that's covered by the consent decree. That's because the consent decree says how policy is going to be made under the consent decree. And there's some pretty significant policies that are covered by the consent decree. That doesn't mean that the commission needs to be silent about stuff that's in the consent decree. There are a lot of ways in which the commission could still be involved, and had some conversations already with the monitor in that case about roles that the commission could play. Under the consent decree, for example, there's supposed to be significant public engagement in the development of policies and in the review of policies, and they've really struggled to have meaningful community engagement in that process. So we're hoping, and the monitoring team is hoping, that the commission and ultimately the district councils can help in that process, help get more people involved. And if there are issues that are covered by the consent decree, even if that means that the commission can't make those policies, doesn't mean that the commission couldn't express opinions about what those policies should be, or monitor implementation of those policies, raise concerns if the commission thinks that concerns are warranted. So there are lots of ways that the commission could be engaged. I think the commission could also be engaged in that there are literally hundreds of requirements in the consent decree, and the way that we've kind of tracked the consent decree so far has mostly been about like what percentage of things that are required by the consent decree have been done, which I at least find to be a really not helpful way to think about what's in the consent decree. Of the hundreds of things in the decree, some things are more important than others. Some things are really foundational, should happen sooner rather than later. What kind of progress are we making on the things that are most important? How are we doing on the things that are most foundational? The commission could choose to get deep into the weeds on those things and maybe provide a useful public function, educating people about what's in the consent decree, and helping to push for critical priorities.
Are there any change management systems in place to address police officers with a number of complaints on their records?
Kinda. I think the short answer is not enough. I think this really is, this is an area where the police department needs to do better. I think there's stuff that will come as a result of the consent decree that will help to address this, but this is an area where the police department needs to be doing a lot better.
Is there a structure in the plan to allow and encourage police participation?
Police participation in the work of the commission and district councils?
Yes.
Yeah. So under the ordinance, police officers can't, like active duty police officers can't serve on the commission, but there's a requirement that the police superintendent be able to appoint someone to participate in all of the commission deliberations. And there are a bunch of requirements in the ordinance that the commission and the police department come to work together around things. So lots of requirements for engagement there. And then we're going to need to work out over time what that means in practice. My own view is it's critically important that happen, that there be a ton of engagement between the commission and the police department. I don't know of any place in the world where there's been meaningful police reform that hasn't involved deep engagement with and participation by police departments. So the only way to move forward is to move forward together. So both in ways that are specified in the ordinance and in other ways, there's going to need to be lots of participation by people in the police department. And then at the district council level, that is fundamentally about work between people in communities and police officers and police district leadership. in those communities. So that's going to be all about police and community engagement and interaction.
Okay. A major initiative to prevent police violence is the ABLE project, Active Bystander for Law Enforcement at Georgetown University Law Center. This program draws on the work of the Holocaust survivor, Irvin Struby, to enable police officers to step up and stop the violence of the officers of the other police officers. So far, 213 police departments have been certified. Is Chicago one of them? If not, is this being considered?
I'm ashamed to say I'm not familiar with that program, and I don't know whether or not Chicago's involved. I'd be happy to share my contact information, and I'd love to learn more about it and find out whether it's something that whether Chicago's gone through that process or not. I'm sorry, I don't know.
Okay. Does the commission involved in policy extend to labor matters, including union contract provisions?
It doesn't cover union contract provisions. There are a bunch of limitations in state law that set out the process for labor negotiations, and that's something that the commission won't be involved in.
Someone wrote, I have thought that the police should carry liability insurance like healthcare workers. Would this be an area of concern for this commission?
I don't know is the short answer. I've seen that proposal in other places and heard arguments on both sides about whether it would lead to meaningful change, and I don't honestly know enough. It may be an idea that deserves more exploration, and it could be something that the commission would want to look into, but I frankly haven't dug deep enough on that particular issue.
Julie, I noticed that you had your hand up. Do you still have a question?
Yeah, thank you. Adam, this has been fantastic. This is a really good, I was working a lot with Carper before tonight, so I did know a fair amount, but this has been incredibly informative. And there were numerous things, and you can see I'm on my phone, so I can't really type a question. So I thank you for opening it up, Tina. Several things. You mentioned a couple of times about, Adam, getting out the word. And that's something that I'm very concerned about, because I'm an organizer, and whenever I'm talking to folks, very few people even know that ECPS is a thing. And they certainly don't know that there's getting ready to be elections in January and my own personal fear is that, the FOP is going to put up a bunch of right-wing, not the kind of people we want, and they're all going to get elected. And so I'm wondering to what extent you already have a plan in place for getting the word out, and to what extent organizers and grassroots can support that. I've got a couple of other questions too, but let me stop there and let you answer that one.
Yeah, I can say more about the second thing than the first. It's hard for me to have a plan in place for getting the word out, because right now it's just me, but I think that's a super critical function for the staff. Once I have more of a staff, I hope and expect that community organizations are going to play a giant-sized role in getting the word out. One of the things that I'm excited about with the ordinance is just the fact that this commission exists because there was a huge grassroots effort to create it over a many-year period. As you know, Carper working on it for years before GAPA was. So literally like hundreds of thousands of hours involving tens of thousands of people to get us to this point. And it will all be for naught if there isn't a ton of engagement in the process. So I think the fact that grassroots organizations and community-based organizations were so deeply invested in the process is going to be critical to the success of it. And I know a lot of those organizations have begun efforts to spread the word, and they know that that stuff has to pick up even more. leading up to February 2023, and like really starting soon, because if people are going to be running for stuff, they need to be making those decisions and and organizing months and months in advance. So I expect to continue to work with those organizations, and once I have a staff, to engage that staff pretty heavily in that work. But we're going to need a ton of partners. I expect that the organizations that have been deeply involved in the work so far will be very deeply involved in the outreach. But it's like every organization that has been involved needs to reach out to like 10 other organizations and get them just as deeply involved in the work going forward.
Yeah, to the extent that you can facilitate any introductions. I mean, yeah, obviously this is a league thing, but a bunch of us that are here, just flipping through the names of who all's here, a bunch of us belong to a bunch of other organizations, and I belong to 2 or 3 others myself, and in turn, have coalitions with others, right? So if there's a place to sign up, or something along those lines, let me know. Let us know.
That's great. And I imagine some of it is going to be, doing things like I'm happy to spend as much of my time as is humanly possible going out and spreading the word. I imagine a bunch of it is going to be like putting together materials that other people can use to train other people, so that there are, like dozens or hundreds of people doing the kind of stuff that I'm doing, and also probably with fewer words and, in a more compelling way.
And then, as you say, as you're staffing up, have you got your hands full with plenty of qualified candidates, or are you looking for references for people who want to join the team?
I am always looking for references. I have some good names. The city hiring process is slow, and there's still some stuff that needs to happen with the budget office and human resources to get me the stuff that I'll need to be able to help spread the word. But there are positions that I would love to fill as soon as possible. I think I'm going to be in a place within a couple of days, probably to spread the word. And there's some great jobs to do, and just a super cool opportunity to build this thing from scratch. So I am always looking for great names, and for a bunch of the positions which are Shackman exempt, there aren't any limitations. No one's going to get in trouble by reaching out to share names of people who you think would be great candidates. And I would love it for anyone who has thoughts to help spread the word and to share names.
And is your email the best way to do that, or?
Yeah, for now, sure, yeah.
Okay. Do you want to put that in the chat, or should I get it from Tina from the league?
I can tell you what it is. It's pretty easy to remember. And if someone who's more adept than I wants to put it in the chat, it's just adam.gross, ADAM.GROSS @cityofchicago.org.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Thank you for entertaining all of my questions. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
We have one last question. Does so-called qualified immunity as a legal standard stand in the way of holding police officers accountable for violations of the rights of citizens?
Yes. We could spend a couple hours on this one. The qualified immunity standard, which is something sort of created in the weird way under statute and the Constitution, makes it much harder to find that some kind of new bad misbehavior is off limits. The way that courts have interpreted qualified immunity, they basically said that unless a police officer has done something that we've already said is illegal, they can't be held liable for a constitutional violation. There's still lots of other ways to hold police officers accountable for things, but for the kinds of remedies that you can get in federal court, in some ways, the way that qualified immunity has been interpreted by courts over the last several decades has just continued to narrow the scope of what can be enforced and the kinds of rights that can be protected, sometimes in ways that that are really hard to imagine and understand.
One last question. How do you suggest that people will learn more about the police department, their functions, how they work? I know they have something called a Chicago Police Department Citizen Police Academy. And that supposed to, I mean, if you have the citizens overseeing the police department, I think people should understand what is the structure of the Chicago Police Department as well. So are you going to be advocating for citizens to actually take that training, or how are you going to go about doing that?
Yeah, so there are, I think, two parts to that question. One, thinking about folks who are on the commission and on the district council, and a bunch of our work on the staff is going to be creating training for commission members and district council members. And I think of training as something that will have to happen continuously. Like there will be a lot of training that they'll need to get before they start their work on the commission and district councils. But that training, because there's so much, that training is going to have to continue, you know, probably for as long as someone is serving on the commission and district councils. You know, it'd be like the same sort of training that's required in lots of professions, where you just need to do a bunch on a regular basis year after year. And I think you're also asking more generally about how people in Chicago more generally can learn more about the police department. I hope that both the commission and district councils will play some role in educating people through the work that they do. And there, you mentioned one program that the police department runs that I've heard generally very positive things about from people who've participated, that it's been a good way for people to learn a lot about what the police department does in a pretty nitty-gritty way. And I can imagine the commission and district councils helping to spread the word and encourage spread the word about and encourage participation in those kinds of programs. And there may be others. I'm familiar a little bit with the one that you mentioned. I don't know what others there might be, but I totally agree with your premise that in order for commissioners and district council members to do their jobs effectively, and for all of us as residents of the city of Chicago to do our jobs as residents of the city of Chicago effectively, we should know a lot more about the department and how it operates.
The League of Women Voters of Chicago would like to thank you, Adam, for this great presentation. I think it was very informative with everyone. I know that we probably still have millions and thousands of questions for you, but again, we'd like to thank you for everything, and hopefully we can get you back again so we can learn more. You know, once you get everything in progress, you got your foundation, you got all your members of your team, and you can come back and tell us more.
I would love to do that. I really appreciate this opportunity. I know a big chunk of my work is going to be about spreading the word, and it's also going to be about getting input about how to make this thing work. Again, like we're building it from scratch. I hope we'll get a lot right. We will certainly get some things wrong. I think we're less likely to get things wrong, and we're more likely to fix things that are wrong the more participation there is from more people. So I welcome an opportunity to continue the conversation offline with anyone who'd like to continue it, and to figure out ways to come back anytime. These have been great questions and great conversation, and the success of the commission and the district councils is ultimately going to depend on all of you and lots of the rest of us across the city getting as deeply engaged as you've been. So thank you so much, and thank you for those opportunities going forward.